This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben. This week marked a key date in Michigan's election cycle with the passing of the filing deadline for candidates to submit signatures or paperwork to appear on the ballot in August and November. Election 2024 is on a roll.
In a way, it feels like campaign season never really ends anymore, so can it truly begin? But that is a question for another day, because indeed it is going. Democrats' control of Michigan's state government is at risk in November, with Democrats' narrow 56-54 margin in the state House up for re-election. Republicans are going to go all out trying to get a voting majority back after watching almost 2 years of Democrats run the House, Senate, and governor's office, moving many Republican priorities just sort of off the shelf. We talked to both the House Republican campaign chair, Representative Bill G. Schuette, and the Democratic campaign chair, Representative Regina Weiss, about how they see this race for control playing out.
The House is certainly up for grabs, and if you look at the 2022 election, which was, unfortunately a tough year for the Republicans, it was still an incredibly close election at the state House level. We were, 1,400 votes away from holding the gavel right now, and there were 7 seats, Cheyna, that Republicans lost by less than 2,000 votes. And, I think we're shaping up to have a much more competitive general election environment in this in 2024. And, I would start with looking at those 7 seats that we lost by that painfully close of a margin.
I am working very hard with the rest of my colleagues in our House Democratic Caucus, as well as our candidates who are running to be part of our caucus, to ensure that we are not only working to maintain our majority, but that we will be expanding our majority for next term. And I am immensely proud and humbled by the amount of work that this legislature has been able to get done just in this term alone. But at the same time, we know that having a very narrow majority, a 1-vote majority, has made it challenging to get every single piece of legislation across the finish line that we may have wanted to.
Republicans had control of the chamber for more than 10 years before Democrats took it back in 2022. So they definitely want to go all out in getting this majority back and putting a stop to complete Democratic control. Democrats want to keep that control, and they have 2 more years guaranteed of it if they keep the House this year, with Governor Whitmer going until 2026 and the Senate going until 2026. Where we're going to see this battle for control really take place are districts in Downriver, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, and Macomb County. But it's not just Michigan House candidates that were finalized this week, right, Cheyna?
That's right. So for Congress, Michigan has an open U.S. Senate seat. Remember that decades-long mainstay Debbie Stabenow will not be running again. And there's also several competitive U.S. House seats. So the Democratic U.S. Senate primary is highlighted by U.S. Representative Elissa Slotkin. And the Republican favorite is actually former U.S. Representative Mike Rogers. However, in that race, there's a couple big names that might sound familiar, like U.S. Reps Peter Meijer and Justin Amash.
Like you said, Cheyna, the U.S. Senate race is going to be huge this year. Besides president, that's really going to highlight, the top of the ticket. Looking back at the U.S. House, there's some highlights here after the filing deadline this week. So we didn't see a big name Democratic challenger coming out against Rep. Rashida Tlaib in Detroit. There was some talk again about maybe challenging her. No one really materialized there. The big competitive seats where, in November, we're going to see a lot of money pouring in is the 8th district in mid-Michigan. Both sides have primaries there, so we'll see how that plays out in August. And then, that'll really, be a huge seat into the fall. The 7th district in Lansing is former Senator Tom Barrett, a Republican, and former Senator Curtis Hertel, a Democrat. So there's no primary there, so that race will just keep swinging from now until November.
Basically, everyone prepare for the political ads and let the mailbox watching begin. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with our conversations with Representatives Schuette and Weiss. Welcome back to MichMash. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben. Today we're joined by Representative Bill G. Schuette, a Republican of Midland. Rep. Schuette, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Alethia, Cheyna, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed every episode of MichMash so far, and I'm really looking forward to being on this side of the mic.
Well, let's start with some basics. You are chair of the House Republican Campaign Committee. For the uninitiated, what does that mean? What do you do, and how influential is the HRCC?
Yeah, so the House Republican Campaign Committee is our caucus operation and organization that is charged with recruiting the candidates, raising the resources, and going and taking our message to voters across our state, from our border with Wisconsin down to Indiana and Ohio. And in this election, I'd say it's especially important as we're trying to retake the chamber for Republicans. And I'm honored to be the chair of that effort and of that organization representing our Republican caucus.
So this week was the filing deadline. So this was the last moment when candidates had to get in if they're going to be on the ballot in August and then potentially in November. So what Republican candidates are you most excited about, and where in the state are they running?
Yeah, it was kind of like that movie that won the Oscars last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was a quarterly filing deadline. It was a campaign finance filing deadline. We've got the NFL draft in Detroit this week, so a lot of things going on. But I'm really excited about our candidates, and I'm excited that we have a full slate of candidates, 110 districts, again from every corner of our state. And I would like to say that it speaks to the operation of HRCC, and that was something that Leader Hall made a clear prerogative, is that we have to have candidates in every single seat, and we have done that. That's normally a function that was left to the state party, but in our current environment, HRCC picked up that mantle and was able to do it. I'm very excited about the deep bench and deep slate of candidates that we have, where we have primaries. I think that will kind of help iron sharpen iron and have us have strong candidates for the elections in the fall.
Now, the House this year is really up for grabs. The Democrats currently hold it by a very slim majority. And of course, Republicans are eager to get back their majority in the House. What districts do you see as being the most competitive?
Well, you're right. It's, the House is certainly up for grabs. And if you look at the 2022 election, which was, unfortunately a tough year for the Republicans, it was still an incredibly close election at the state House level. We were, 1,400 votes away from holding the gavel right now. And there were 7 seats, Cheyna, that Republicans lost by less than 2,000 votes. And, I think we're shaping up to have a much more competitive general election environment in this in 2024. And, I would start with looking at those 7 seats that we lost by that painfully close of a margin. But I'd also look at, between 2016 and 2020, there are 10 seats currently held by Democrats that Donald Trump won. And when you factor in that the House Republicans have overperformed the top of the ticket by 9 points as much in last election, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to go on offense and retake the gavel this November.
So former President Trump, he inspires a lot of feelings on both sides of the equation. How are you going to counsel candidates to, deal with the former president at the top of the ticket? Do they embrace him? Do they talk about him? Do they avoid him? What's the strategy there?
I think, this is going to be an election about were you better off under the presidency of President Trump, or were you better off under Joe Biden? And I think people can, look at how their savings are eroded under Joe Biden. They can, look at how their paychecks are going less and less far at the grocery store, or on their energy bills under Democrat leadership. And they can look at the crisis on our southern border. And the contrast is clear. And I think that's why the top of the ticket dynamics, a weak, failed presidency of Joe Biden compared with Donald Trump, voters are going to choose Donald Trump. And you've seen that reflected in the polling. I think you'll see that in our messages. I'd also say, Trump's base shows up in general elections when he's on the ballot. And a lot of the times you get the negatives of a personality like President Trump, who's fairly polarizing. You get the negatives no matter if he's on the ballot or not. The base turnout, you really you get more often when he's on the ballot. So I think it'll be a positive for us across the state and across the ticket.
Do you think, the former president can still be a positive for state house candidates, say in a district like the 103rd in the Traverse City area where you want to unseat an incumbent Dem, and in the 81st in Grand Rapids where it's an open seat where the Democrat holds it now and it's, clearly a target for you guys? Can Trump be a positive in seats like that where he is unpopular?
So again, that's where I think the strength of the House Republican campaign operation of our candidates that we have filed here on the deadline is so strong because, our candidates, they fit their districts like a glove. And in seats like Traverse City and in seats in the Grand Rapids area, we have candidates who have decades of community experience. They have their own local brand or brand. Sorry for the bad pun there. In their districts that reflect the types of communities and voters will be willing to go and vote for those candidates. You look on the other side of the aisle. You look at the Democrats. They're a monolithic. Some of their most liberal members, some of their most far left progressive members are in some of those most progressive or in the most swing seats, the most toss up seats. And I think that's where, when you really drill down to that state house level, you're going to see the strength of Republican candidates shine.
So would you say that the strategy is more a message of anti-Biden as opposed to pro-Trump, or are you trying to find more of a balance than that?
I would say that the message is that Michiganders were better off under Republican leadership, whether that was in a growing, booming economy under President Trump, or with Republican leadership in our state legislature. There's not a time when I'm knocking on doors in my own district of Midland, if I'm downriver or if I'm on the west side of the state. People are frustrated with their energy and heating bills, and Michigan Democrats have only made that worse. So we're going to have the opportunity to provide contrast of positive policy, but also I don't know many people who are happy with the weak and frail presidency of Joe Biden.
In 2022, another huge issue we saw in Michigan was abortion rights with the constitutional amendment on the ballot. Now that, is settled in some ways, at least in Michigan, but we're going to see Democrats hitting abortion and reproductive rights hard still, I think, in their campaigns. How do you think that'll affect Republican campaigns, if at all?
I don't think it really will have an impact because, we saw voters approve a constitutional amendment in the last election. And, because of that, there is a right to an abortion for any reason enshrined in our state's constitution. There's not anything that I, as a legislator, or any other member of the legislature can do to change that. And so because of that, I'm sure Democrats will try to use it as an issue, but I think voters are smarter than that. I think voters realize that this was settled in the last election, and people will be voting on their pocketbooks. They'll be voting on the fact that you go to the grocery store and we're seeing families having to take items off the conveyor belt because prices are going up and up. You're getting sticker shock every time you get your utility bill. And those are going to be the types of issues that decide this election.
It looks like two Republicans have emerged to challenge Rep. Matt Maddock Milford for renomination in the 51st House District GOP primary. There's going to be Laura Vogel of White Lake Township and Milford Village Councilmember Kevin Ziegler. What are your thoughts on a race like this?
So I don't know either of those two individuals. And a nice thing that I get to do as the chair of the House Republican Campaign Committee is I'm focused on elections in November. I'm focused on supporting our candidates that come through the primaries. So we don't get involved in primaries. Our bylaws prohibit it. And, I know that, again, iron sharpens iron. We'll have stronger candidates that come through our primaries that will be able to go and win in November.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more about, the HRCC not getting involved in primaries? This is pretty standard for, at least in Michigan, for the legislative campaign committees, but is that sometimes hard? I mean, are there times when, you want to get involved because maybe, one of the candidates, could be stronger? And I'm not talking about the 51st
Yeah.
specifically, talking very generally here.
Mm-hmm. No, it certainly can go a couple of different ways. I know when I was running as a non-incumbent last time, I certainly wanted HRCC to get involved in my primary because I was such a great candidate. But now on the flip side, as the House Republican Campaign Committee, I think it's good that candidates have to prove their own mettle, have to do the fundraising, have to do the door knocking, and I think in a primary, the hardest working candidate, the candidate with the message that most, resonates with voters, they almost always win. I mean, that's one of the virtues of the state house is you can meet every primary voter. I knocked on 12,000 doors in my primary, and because of that, you can knock on every door twice. You get to know people, and I think that is a good way to go and win in primaries, and that's why I think it'll be positive for the candidates we have coming through in November.
House Republicans got buried by national Democratic dark money in 2022 that rendered irrelevant money the candidates and caucuses raised. Are you worried about a repeat of this?
I'm not, and I think that's again something that Leader Hall and our HRCC team has done so well is raising resources. I mean, it's frankly unheard of for the party and the minority to not only keep pace but have more cash on hand than the party and the majority, and that's because Leader Hall and his team that he's assembled on HRCC, we've been crisscrossing the state and encouraging people to invest in a brand that's bringing some balance back to the policymaking process here in Lansing, and you've seen people want to invest in that, and that maybe some voters who were and donors who were disenfranchised with the party in the past, or other people who are realizing now more than ever, seeing, wow, this we can't let Michigan become an Illinois or a California. Because of that, you've seen record fundraising, $1 million quarters, things that you'd never seen before. We're going to have the resources to go and win. That doesn't mean George Soros and out-of-state money isn't going to come in here, but there comes a point where voters will be saturated with spending from the presidential race to the U.S. Senate race. The HRCC will have the resources we need. The cavalry will come home for our candidates.
So, what are one or two votes you think Democrats have taken so far this term that will hurt their incumbents seeking re-election?
I think the energy package that was rammed through in the cold dark of night last November is going to be one of the biggest issues. And again, that's something that resonates all across our state. People are frustrated with the price of their utilities downriver and in Macomb, where you've seen some very vulnerable Democrat incumbents. But I tell you what, in Traverse City, along the lakeshore, and in Marquette, they're not happy with state control of the ability to put a windmill or a solar panels, right outside their front door. And those are votes that are going to hit people in their pocketbooks. And they really, again, show where the Democrat caucus is out of step with the communities that they represent. So, I think that that energy package is going to hit very hard. And I think, Democrat efforts to, spend down our $9 billion surplus and ignore a cut to our state income tax. Again, when inflation is already taxing people's savings, already taxing people's incomes, they're going to really hit that. Michiganders are going to be hit hard by that, and that's going to be a reckoning with voters come November.
I'm interested that you mentioned the energy package, which you said was voted on last November, so it'll be about a year come election time. How do you keep issues like that front of mind for voters, and make sure that they remember, I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, we have short memory spans.
No, it is, but it's made a lot easier when people are paying monthly energy bills and monthly utility bills, and especially in the fall when the heat starts to kick back on, and in the summertime when the AC is blaring, people will be reminded of that. And again, that's an issue that you hear about across our state. Whether you're looking at polling or you're doing the scientific door knocking of polling as well, and so it's already at the front of mind of voters, of Michiganders, because they're paying these bills that are going up and up. And again, that's why I'm glad that Leader Hall and our team have assembled the resources we need to communicate the message, to connect the dots of we have the most, one of the most progressive, far left Green New Deal energy policies in the entire country right here in the state of Michigan, and that's really negatively impacting Michiganders.
So Democrats yesterday mentioned Minority Leader Hall's seat as one of their targets in November. This seat certainly could go trend Democratic, but it's probably, in my opinion, years away. What's your opinion on having the minority leader in their target list right now?
Yeah, Alethia, we knew that Democrats really were not fiscally responsible, but can you imagine you just, blowing all this money over a lost cause just because of a personal vendetta? I think that's it's really not a seat that's going to be competitive for the Democrats. And I know Leader Hall has done a good job, representing his district, locking down his district, and Democrats are welcome to waste their money in seats like that. We'll just go and take back the majority in November. So sounds fine to me.
Representative Bill G. Schuette, thank you so much for joining us here today on MichMash.
Hey, really enjoyed the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Welcome back to MichMash. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben. Today we have Representative Regina Weiss with us. Hi, Representative.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good. So we have you here because you are chair of the House Democrats campaign arm. What does that mean? What is the major parts of your job?
Yeah, so I am working very hard with the rest of my colleagues in our House Democratic Caucus, as well as our candidates who are running to be part of our caucus, to ensure that we are not only working to maintain our majority, but that we will be expanding our majority for next term.
So right now, Democrats have a tight 56-54 majority in the House. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of the work that you're doing to, like you said, not only keep the 56, but potentially, pad that voting majority up higher come November?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, first of all, incredibly impressive, and I am immensely proud and humbled by the amount of work that this legislature has been able to get done just in this term alone. The amount of legislation that we've passed that has been signed into law, I can't remember what number we're at right now, but I believe we're over 350 PAs at this point. The amount of work that this legislature has been able to accomplish is very impressive. But at the same time, we know that having a very narrow majority, a one vote majority, has made it challenging to get every single piece of legislation across the finish line that we may have wanted to. And we also know that it doesn't leave us any room for error. So when we saw two members run for public office, for example, back last year, until our new members are sworn in on Tuesday, it's been even more challenging to get legislation across the finish line. So we want to make sure that we have more support in our caucus to be able to continue to move and advance our Democratic priorities.
Now, in 2022, Governor Whitmer won by 10 points. And then in 2024, regardless of who wins, former President Trump or President Biden, it doesn't look like they're going to be taking the state by 10 points. I mean, it seems like the margins between the two parties are really starting to shrink in Michigan. How is that factoring into your strategy?
Certainly. And I think there's a few things to consider to keep in mind. One, obviously, we know that we obviously went through a redistricting process, a nonpartisan redistricting process, which has leveled the playing field quite a bit between Dems and Republicans when we talk about the number of competitive seats that there are. And because of that shift and because of that change, we were able to flip the state house and the state senate last year. We also know that the majority of our candidates in our kind of frontline races tend to outperform the top of the ticket. And that's because they're out in their communities, they're talking to voters, they're doing the work and building relationships. And so that's why we have several members of our caucus that have been able to outperform the top of the ticket. And even in areas where the top of the ticket has lost, we have members who have won their seats because of the work that they're doing. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to support them in that effort.
Abortion was also, a huge issue in 2022 with the constitutional amendment on the ballot. Certainly, I think nationally, abortion will still be an issue, but maybe without as much, importance in Michigan. Do you think Democrats will still focus on abortion and reproductive rights with their candidates in 2024? And how do you keep that relevant?
Absolutely. I mean, we know from being out on the doors, talking to constituents, talking to folks across the state, this is still an issue. Just because the ballot initiative passed, just because we've done more to strengthen reproductive freedom and reproductive health care in Michigan, we know that we also need to protect those freedoms. And we also know that that issue continues to resonate with voters. We hear it time and time again when we talk to voters out in the community and out in the doors. And so they are paying attention to this issue. They care a lot about this issue, and they're going to support candidates that they know are going to protect their rights.
Some Democrats, including yourself, are facing potentially serious primaries. Another notable one includes former Warren Mayor Jim Fouts filing against Representative Mike McFaul from Hazel Park. What do you make of these primaries?
Just in terms of in these newer districts, you mean?
Yeah, like how is that
impact?
how is that like impacting your strategy going forward? Is this going to cause a lot of division in the party depending on who wins the primaries? Like where are you at?
Yeah, so I mean, primaries, we're especially in the Detroit area, we are not unfamiliar with Democratic primaries. So this is something that we deal with every single cycle. Obviously, we just had the redistricting lawsuit. A lot of those districts in the Detroit metro area were redrawn again. And so those district lines have changed, and we've seen some folks come out to challenge in some of those seats because of that. We are confident, all of our returning members are confident in their ability to both protect their seat, come back in their primary, but also continue to do work to support those seats that we need to bring back in November and the seats that we need to flip.
One legislative issue that Republicans have said they want to hit hard as a negative, as they're running against Democrats across the state, is this renewable energy package that passed last year. This did a variety of things, including sort of changing siting authority and giving the state some more room there to set up solar and wind farms. Democrats, I think, were quite, proud of this. So how do you see that contrast, and are you, ready to stand up for that package?
Again, when we talk to people about energy, about renewable energy, about climate change, we hear again, time and time again, that these are central issues to folks across the state. People want to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to address climate change in our state. Particularly our younger voters really care a lot about that, but all of our voters care about making sure that we address climate change. It's not just an environmental issue, it's an economic issue, it's a community issue, it's an infrastructure issue, it's all of these things. So everything that we can do to combat climate change in our state, we need to be doing it. And so we are proud of the work that we are able to get across the finish line with that legislation. We also know that folks care a lot about having the ability to have control over especially folks in our rural communities want to have control over what they can do with their own land. And these bills enabled them to be able to do that. And so we're proud of the work that we've been able to do. Our members are out getting that message out to the community so that folks know about it. And I think that that's going to be a losing issue for them.
Who are a few candidates in competitive general election seats that you're particularly excited about come November?
Yeah, so I would say there's two that I would really want to highlight. We have a few where there's primaries, so we kind of want to wait to see how those primaries shake out. But in a couple of seats that we know are going to be high target seats for us, one is in District 28, and downriver, that's Representative Thompson's current seat. We have a really strong candidate there in Janice O'Neill Robinson. Janice is a teacher, she's a wife, she's a mom, she grew up in Taylor. She teaches, I believe, in Brownstown. I might have flipped that. She grew up in one town and taught in the other, but she's from the area, she's from the community, and she has, she was raised by a working mother and a dad who had a life-changing injury at the age of 24. And so she's really learned from her father and from the sacrifices that her family made that people can adapt to their disabilities And that's why she decided to become a special education professional. And she's really been a leader in that. And we know that she's really, really beloved in her community, and we're excited about her as a candidate. As a teacher myself, I'm always happy and excited to welcome another teacher into the legislature. Also in House District 46 in Jackson, that's Representative Schmaltz's current seat. We have a great candidate there in Daniel Mahoney. He's the current mayor of Jackson, and he's a former Jackson County commissioner. And he also previously served as president of the Jackson County branch of the NAACP. And he also currently works for the Michigan AFL-CIO, and lives in Jackson, supports his community again. He's the mayor of Jackson. So folks obviously love him. They've come out to support him in the past, and we're confident that he'll be able to win that seat as well.
So what is the contrast that you want to show between Democratic candidates and the Republicans, in seats like you just mentioned and other, competitive seats across the state?
You said the contrast?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I want to make sure that folks know about is our members who are fighting to win these seats, they're doing it for the same reasons, and that's to support the people in their districts. They're running to represent their community. And so they are out and they are listening to what people are actually saying, the things that they actually need support for on issues like making sure that we are fully funding our education system. All of these Republicans all voted no on the school aid budget last year. They voted to defund education in our state. Voters in Michigan will not stand for that. They want to make sure that we are supporting our education system. They want to make sure that we are investing in areas that are going to lower costs for families, and that are going to support people who need help, and that are going to support all those issues that folks care about, and that are going to protect our fundamental freedoms. And that is what all of our candidates are working towards and running on. And so I think the voters will show out and support those candidates come November.
Speaking of showing out, I mean, there's been a lot of chatter that Democratic voters are not as excited about President Biden, either because of his age or because of how the last couple of years have gone. What are you seeing on the ground? Will Democrats be motivated enough come November?
I think so. I think part of the issue has just been, honestly, a messaging issue. The Biden administration has done a tremendous amount of work, and the economy is, if you look at it as a whole, is very healthy and doing very well. But folks, that word isn't necessarily getting out to people. People don't necessarily feel that. And so we need to do a better job in making sure that folks know about a lot of the great work that the Biden administration has done, that we have done here in Michigan under Democratic trifecta. And that's on us. It's on us to make sure that we are getting out there and getting the word out. And as we are doing that, as we are talking to voters, we hear time and time again, wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I'm so happy that's happening, or I'm so happy that got done. A lot of times we'll be talking to folks who care a lot about an issue, and we'll say, oh, well, this and this has already happened. And folks aren't necessarily aware about it. So we're doing everything that we can to get the word out about a lot of the accomplishments that we've been able to make in our Democratic trifecta, and that the Biden administration has been able to make at the national level. And we just want to make sure that voters know about it so that they come out and support. Because when people know about it, they're excited and they're motivated and they want to come out. And it's not simply voting against somebody. They are excited to come out and support our candidates.
One issue that is separating Democrats right now is the situation in Israel and Gaza in the Middle East. This is another issue, too, that will completely affect Democratic candidates differently depending on what part of the state they're running in. Is this a concern, and how, do you plan to counsel candidates to sort of address this issue with voters?
Yeah, again, the one thing to remember, and that we remind folks all the time, we do not do international relations in the state of Michigan. That's just not our jobs. So there is no legislation or policy that we can affect in Michigan, that we can pass to affect what's happening in the Middle East. And so in terms of like actual things that we can do that are real to impact that conflict in any way, it's really not our job as the state legislature. So we remind folks of that They really need to reach out to their Congress members. They really, really need to reach out to their senators when they're concerned about what's happening in the Middle East and in any international conflict that's going on. In terms of how we talk about it, we also encourage our folks to, again, get out into the community and meet people where they are. It is a very divisive issue for so many reasons. There is a lot of pain in the Jewish community. There is a lot of pain in the Muslim community. And we just want to make sure that everyone feels like they're listened to, like they're being supported, and that they're not being shut out of the conversation. And so we encourage everyone to continue to have those conversations and do everything that they can to build bridges between their constituents, because that is what we can do as members of the legislature. We can help support our constituents and where they're at.
Representative Regina Weiss, thank you so much for joining us on MichMash.
Thank you so much for having me.